Hi, this is for Savannah. I hope it's okay with you, Savannah. I find that it's quicker and easier for me to just answer in video form. That way you get complete answers. And also, this is the first time that I'm recording this. And it's actually live. So these are my honest, earnest answers. So let me look at and again, I haven't read your questions yet. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 12 of them, 13, 14 of them. And I do have a call in about a half hour. We'll see. Who are you and what do you do? Please answer. This is mandatory. Okay, well, so my name is David Cohn. Right now, I work for a team called the Alpha Group, which is part of Advanced Digital. Or Advanced Local. Advanced Local, a lot of people know it for the sister company, which is Condé Nast and the Condé Nast magazines. It's a big media company. My team does, you can think of us as research and development. So we build new products, new projects to explore new audiences. Please give me a brief description of your work history and experience in journalism. So I started off as a tech reporter. So I used to write for Wired, .com. I was a geek reporter, science and tech. And I got my master's in journalism at Columbia. And I hate the word consulting, but I did consulting is a good way of explaining it for different news organizations on different projects that were sort of like where media and technology collided. I started something called Spot Us, which was a startup nonprofit that would fundraise for independent journalists. And then I also helped start something called Circa, which was one of the first mobile first news operations. And I helped at the beginning of something called AJ Plus, which is a very big publisher of news videos on Facebook. And I've done a couple other things, but those are like the three things. And then now I'm at Alpha Group. What conflict does fake news create for journalists? And you use fake news. I noticed that you capitalize fake and news. So it's almost like a pronoun. That question is kind of broad. What conflicts does fake news create for journalists? I guess if anything, it just creates, it muddies the water is the quickest version of it, right? Because that accusation, fake news, is so easy to lob. In fact, it's been used by both sides of the podium. If you recall, actually, the first sort of use of the phrase fake news was actually in response to like propaganda from like Russian, meddling with the American election. So it was actually from liberals saying, there is a lot of fake news going around that is confusing people. And then that phrase was then immediately turned around on American news outlets. So the problem is that it muddies the water, right? Like you need people to be able to take things and judge for themselves and sort of like, on a long enough timeline, I actually think unfake news or good news, good content will rise to the top, but not if the waters are so muddy that you can't tell what's going on, right? Or where to start. How does fake news influence the court legal system? I don't know if I could speak to that with any confidence. I'm not a lawyer. I imagine, and again, you're using capital F's and N's here in fake news. So I feel like you're referring to something very specific. In a general sense, if you were to lowercase those, how could fake news influence the court legal system? I'm sure there are ways that we can imagine that it would either influence, in theory, it shouldn't influence jurors. But if things are, admitted, well, no, because you can't admit news as evidence. I don't believe you can. So I really, again, this would be more for a lawyer or a judge. I'm not really sure what you mean by how it could influence the court or legal system. Legal system, if you want to talk about legislators, sure, right? Because they are individuals who can themselves be influenced by fake news, but you put court/legal system. So I'm not sure. Next question. Do you have a particular instance that your work was influenced by fake news? Personal story. Not really sure. Do you have a particular instance that your work was influenced by fake news? Certainly there are examples where, and I'll see if I can find a blog post. When truth and fact collide. I wrote a blog post about this one time called when truth and facts collide. If you look that phrase up and then my name, David Cohn, when truth and fact collide, which side do you take? Because sometimes there are. I'll give you an example. The example that brought this up. This was a while ago. There was a guy named Mike Daisey who did a big piece on Foxconn. Foxconn is the company that makes excuse me, I'm just turning up my fan here with my computer getting up. That makes electronics for Apple, right, in China. And everybody kind of knew that there was problems with the way that they make it. So Mike Daisey goes and he brings back this story for NPR. I think it was This American Life, where he's interviewing people and he gets stories of tragedy and things like that. And then later it turned out that he actually made up certain things. He made up people. I think he made up quotes. He kind of made things up. So the facts weren't correct. But a lot of people said, it doesn't matter because the truth is there, right? There is a truth to what he said. And there certainly is a truth. But the problem is journalists have to have a bias for facts as well as truth, right? It can't rely on just one. You need both. And so the Mike Daisey story was kind of, thrown aside. And you see examples of this a lot. So in the When Truth and Facts Collide, I pointed out to this viral video. It was a viral video. It was after, remember the viral video of the woman walking New York and gets catcalled? So it wasn't about that. There was another viral video of a woman who pretended to be drunk to see how men would treat her. And the men in the video treat her horribly. Just trying to take advantage of her, get her in the car, get her home. And then about a week later, that same woman got on camera and said, look, I was an actor, and so were the men. The men were actors. And she came out and said that because those men had been identified and they themselves were being harassed. Right? People were like, hey, you treated this woman wrong, and they were threatening them. And she was like, look, those men treated me like gentlemen. They were acting on the camera. And so that thing was fake. It was a fake video. Now, there's certainly truth to the point of the video, which is that men will take advantage or can take advantage of women or do take advantage of women when they're drunk, right? But not those particular men and not that particular women. They were acting. They were fake, right? And of course, this was a news story. But I just wanted to point out that so there are truths and there are facts, and it's great when they combine, and sometimes they don't, and that's where some things get a little slippery, right? Because people want to defend the truth that they feel like they know, even if the facts of a particular instance are not in their favor. So that's kind of a nuanced take on one element of fake news. Although again, I don't know if it's exactly how you're talking about it. How has the industry adjusted due to fake news? If anything, I actually think the industry has done two things. One, I think, I don't know if it's the industry, but this phrase fake news, I think, is overused to a certain degree. Two, I would say they actually, the industry has not done themselves any favors in some respects in the pursuit of high traffic, right? So a lot of news organizations will create content that needs to be shared on social. And when you're creating content for social, I'll just use Facebook as the pink elephant in the room, the giant elephant. A headline, historically, 30 years ago, you wrote a headline so that it would be informative to the reader. Today, you write a headline because you want the reader to share it, which means you're writing the headline not to inform the reader, but you're writing the headline so that you're giving the reader something that they can share to their friends to inform them about themselves, right? Because what is Facebook primarily but a way to identify who you are in relationship to the world, right? So Facebook is a social network where I create my sense of identity. News organizations are creating content to help me create my sense of identity by giving me headlines that I can share to my friends to tell them about me, right? Another way that I put this is you're not writing headlines to inform your audience. You're writing headlines to inform your audience's friends, and that's a shift. And that shift, I wouldn't call it fake news, but it certainly blurs the point, right? Because again, you're not writing the headline to inform the reader. You're writing the headline so that the reader can inform their friends about who they see themselves as. A lot of it can be called virtue signaling. And that changes the editorial nature of content. I don't think for the better, to be honest. So that was, I wouldn't say that was an adjustment due to fake news. It was an adjustment due to social media, but looking at what works on social media, which is not information, right? Facebook was not made to be a place where you get news. It was made, like I said, to be a place where you define your identity. And so news organizations had to create content that would allow people to create their identity. How can a journalist take measures to prevent being affected by fake news? Again, I'm not sure. Well, being affected by fake news and capital F, capital N, because again, my problem with that is I feel like you have a specific thing in mind when you talk about fake news with capitals as a pronoun. Like there is a specific fake news, in which case there would be, I could give you specific answers, but I don't know what it is you're talking about. I would say this, you know, that tension between truth and facts, you have to figure that out and figure out where you stand. I, again, think journalists should have a bias for facts, even though that hinders your ability sometimes to tell the truth. You can still tell the truth, but you can't tell that truth until the facts also back you up, right? If the facts don't back you up, you can't get to that truth. You have to find ways to that truth that are factual. Fact checking, right? I mean, being a skeptic of things is really what you need to do. Okay, how are you able to be a credible source when there's so much information circulating? Everyone thinks they're a journalist. Well, so I would say this: everyone can be a journalist. I would say that, right? I mean, not everybody can be a professional journalist, just like not everybody can be a professional musician. But I play guitar. Can I call myself a musician? Yeah, I can, right? Not a professional musician, but I'm a musician. All it takes to be a journalist is to collect, filter, and distribute information with a couple caveats. That information is true and accurate to the best of your ability, obtained ethically, and maybe a couple other caveats. But to do journalism is just like a verb, right? Just like skiing. How do you ski? How do you become a skier? You go up a hill and you go down the hill on skis. You're skiing. You're a skier, right? Maybe not a world-class skier. And you can always get better, just like you can always become a world-class journalist and get better at being a journalist. So really, how do you become a credible source is you just practice it, right? How do you become a good skier? You do it a lot, right? And eventually, like I said, I do believe that good content wins out, that people recognize good content. So you just have to get really good at your craft. It is a craft, right? Anybody can do it, but a lot of people do it really horribly, and people will catch up on that. Next question. Do you believe that fake news, again, capital F and N, is a new phenomenon, or it's just escalated more recently due to the internet and accessibility of information? I don't think it's a new phenomenon. I do think it is a new label or a new term for an old phenomenon, right? You could call it propaganda, right? Propaganda is very, very old, right? The problem is just like historically there wasn't as many newspapers, right? The power of the press belonged to those who owned the press. And so if you wanted to do successful propaganda, you had to be very big and like have kind of a backing. Just like we've seen a democratization of journalism, we've seen a democratization of propaganda, right? I mean, that's what you're seeing on the internet, actually, to some extent today, is a sort of like people are realizing and taking advantage of the fact that creating propaganda is cheaper and easier than it was historically. And that's, you know, really tough for us as a civilization to figure out. So I don't think it's a new phenomenon necessarily. I do think it's escalated. I tend to think most behavior you see online is not new. It's just enabled through new technology, right? Yeah. So I'll keep going. What is your opinion on social media and how it's being used as a news how it's being used as, I think it means as a source of news? I mean, I think when it's being used as a source of news, my opinion is neutral, because in truth, social media can, I shouldn't say it should be neutral. Every platform is designed for a specific purpose, and that purpose changes the editorial nature of it, right? There's this classic phrase from a guy named Marshall McLuhan: the medium is the message, right? The platform is the message here. Or another thing that I say is all code is political, right? Think about the difference between Twitter and Instagram. right? What's the difference? Especially historically, right? When Twitter started, the joke was that you would tweet what you were having for lunch, right? But today, nobody tweets what they're having for lunch. Compare that to Instagram, where people do share what they're having for lunch still, because it's visual, right? Like on Instagram, that's still a popular kind of post, a post of your food. On Twitter, nobody describes it because it's text versus image, right? So different editorial will flourish based off of what the platform does or doesn't kind of enable, right? So, and that's why Twitter is great for breaking news, right? Versus YouTube. YouTube is not great for breaking news. YouTube is great for longer, I would say, like short documentaries, right? Do better on YouTube than they do on Facebook, right? So, what is my thoughts about what is your opinion on social media and how it's being used as a news source? It depends on the social media, right? Every platform is different, and is it being used in the right way? Can they all improve? Absolutely. Do they have to, though? I mean, again, I don't think their original goal was to set out to be a source of news, right? I think they were supposed to be a source of being social, like connecting humans. So, you know, I think they can get better. Overall, I was going to say I'm neutral, right? Because every platform can be used by news organizations, traditional or, more credible news organizations, just like they can be used by propaganda. People who want to promote propaganda. So the platforms are kind of benign on that respect. Although the way that the platforms are organized will determine types of content that will or won't flourish on them. The Facebook thing earlier, right? So yeah. What are your thoughts about politics and social media, specifically Facebook, in regards to fake news? So I kind of described it earlier, this thing about Facebook, and I was just describing a little bit about this as well, like platforms, right? Like what was the platform of Facebook designed to do? It was not designed as a place to get news or really as a place for politicians to hash it out. If anything, it's a way for you to create a sense of your identity in relationship to other people or groups of other people. And I do think that Facebook has a fundamental flaw in its design for political compromise to occur, right? So that's an issue that we have to deal with. What are your thoughts about politics and social media, specifically Facebook, in regards to fake news? Yeah. Is journalism still a credible field of work, or how has fake news diminished this reputation? It is still a credible field of work. I think it always will be, right? Journalism is just a human need. It will never disappear. It will always be kind of something that humans will need to do, right? It's basically, again, collect information, filter information, distribute information that is accurate. So is it a tough time for the industry? Sure. It's not the first tough time for the industry. And it's not just that the industry is having a tough time. I think all of society, I think a lot of institutions right now are under the gun for all kinds of different reasons, right? So either we will go into this. No, I'm not going to make a joke. But anyways, I think you get the point. Do you have any other thoughts or statements regarding fake news? Funny enough, this, at least if I'm taking the questions very literally here, this is the first time you used lowercase for fake news, which again I can't tell if when you're saying fake news with capital F and N, if you mean it as a pronoun, if there's something specific that you mean. And in this case, you're asking me for a general. Do you have any thoughts or statements regarding fake news in general? I do think it's actually a more complicated problem than people make it out to be. I think, giving it this label, fake news, makes it seem like we have a grasp on it, and I don't think we do, right? I think it's actually, like I mentioned earlier, right? It was sort of weaponized by both sides at one point. More successfully, ultimately, it was more successfully weaponized, I would argue, by the right. Although the left still has when we talk about bots and trolls and Russian meddling and things like that, that's a left version of accusations of fake news, right? So I think we have a general problem of trust and a problem of the inability to sort of come together and have discussions. Fake news is a manifestation of that. What consequences or risks are involved when journalists battle fake news? Do you know anyone who has faced legal action due to it? No, but I have a good buddy, a guy named Craig Silverman, who works at BuzzFeed, who does some of the. He actually maybe I don't know if he helped like sort of. He certainly helped popularize the original use of fake news. He does a lot of fact checking. He wrote a book called "Regret the Error," which he made his career by being a fact checker and pointing out where journalists can get better at fact checking. And I think that is, so I do think that there are people who have interesting stories. I don't, at least not off the top of my head. He's the first person that comes to mind. I mean, again, if anything, anybody can create incorrect news, right? I've made incorrect news, and you just correct it, right? So it's totally fine to do something that is inaccurate and then to correct it. So the problem isn't getting something wrong. Journalists have always, potentially gotten things wrong. The problem is people is when there are credible accusations that people are creating incorrect news on purpose with the intent to persuade people. So and again, it's basically lying, right? And liars have always existed, right? So that's not going to change. But anyways, let's. I'm going to end it here, but let me know if you have any other questions. Feel free to reach out. Thank you very much.